Welcome in. A little impromptu Longhorn live stream. CJ Vogel, Bobby Burton here to take you through about 30 minutes here. We're going to take some questions, talk a little Longhorn football. CJ, you and I both attended press availability of both Michael Taff as well as All-American Kelvin Banks to this afternoon. We also had a little bit of news earlier today. We are currently tracking the decision potentially of young Cade Phillips, the defensive back, who maybe, it sounds like, exploring options of switching his commitment from Texas to possibly LSU. We also have a news alert that came out that said Texas and Texas A&M had a news conference set for next week. A lot of people thought that might be moving or were worried that might be Texas and Texas A&M moving to a neutral site game. I confirm that is not true. It won't be a neutral site game. But CJ, let's start with the two guys that we listened to this afternoon, starting with Michael Taff. He was asked, by the way, about Silas Bolden, and what he had to say I thought was very interesting. Matt, our producer, we play that clip from this afternoon's press availability.
Monster. Do it all, selfless guy. Whatever he needs to do, whatever the coaches need him to do, he's going to do it. And I'm sure y'all have heard the speed, the hands, the routes, but I want to mention that how selfless of a player he is. I told him that the other day. I was like, dude, never lose that. I've never seen somebody that's, got so much hype, but not let that hype get to him and just put his head down and grind. He's a beast. All respect to Silas.
Good stuff. They have. He's not the only one that's talked about Silas Bolden, CJ, through this training camp thus far. The young man out of Oregon State really making some waves in Austin.
Yeah, definitely. He's been a name that's popped up several times, whether it be from players in these availabilities, Sarkisian, or sources that we've talked to in regards to scrimmages or just what's going on in practice. And I think with Michael Taff there, you get a sense of why I think he would be such a great coach after playing football, right? He has that kind of natural ability to connect with a new player, to see what the good in them is outside of just football. For him to come out and say basically, he's been a welcomed addition to the locker room is great on two fronts, right? It's great for not just Silas Bolden and his kind of accommodations to the team and what he can bring there to the locker room, but for Sarkisian and his staff to identify a player of need and a guy that's going to seamlessly fit into the locker room. It shows that they're not just adding anybody, but guys that will, fit right on in and have those like-minded goals of winning championships, maybe making some sacrifices, but as long as the wins are piling up, they'll be all set.
I thought it was appropriate that they gave us Michael Taff this afternoon, given that there's 16 days left before the start of football season, and Michael Taff just happens to be number 16. Some other things that he had to say. I asked him specifically about helmet communication, CJ, and I thought that was a nicely revealing level of what he is hearing on the helmet earpiece type stuff. The thing that he said that was very good wasn't just the play call that was coming in, just like on offense, where an offensive coach can say, hey, make sure you get the ball out quick here to a quarterback, or make sure you look for protection one side or the other. The defense can do something else too. And that means seeing little nuances in how people or how teams are lined up. And, hey, make sure you watch the wheel route here, that sort of thing. It really gave us a little clearer view of how Texas hopes to use the defensive helmet communication as well.
Yeah, it was, right? And, we're still kind of sitting here debating or wondering who's going to have it full time. I think the heavy favorite right now is Anthony Hill, but, to have an idea of what they are hearing is very interesting, to pull back the curtain. And I think the football lingo Michael Taff was speaking to us about, Bobby, was exactly what they would hear on a Saturday afternoon, right? Watch for the number 2 receiver to line up this way. Watch for the running back if he's, 2 yards outside of the tackle or whatever it might be that maybe you don't see from 12 yards deep as a safety. that can then be relayed. And I liked what he called it, right? It's the eagle eye in the sky. Folks are from the press box giving that call down to the guy on the field to give them an idea of what they see up top. Of course, all within 15 seconds from the snap, of course. But they do see stuff differently, and if they're able to then diagnose that and relay that on, you could certainly find a way to have an advantageous kind of approach defensively there.
I like it. A couple other things that Michael Taff mentioned about. He was asked whether or not he's become a mentor to other walk-ons. You think about it, he's been around and he's actually reached or attained some of his dreams when he came to Texas as a walk-on to get on the field, be a starter, that sort of thing. He said that, some younger guys have approached him that are walk-ons, say, hey, what's the secret to success, et cetera. He talked about the difference between dreams and goals. And he said dreams are what you really hope to attain long-term, like you're in your career, et cetera. Like you want to be a starter for Texans. Goals are something that you can set every week, and every single day you should be working hard for it. Impressive young man, I thought, overall in his press availability today. Speaking about stuff like that just tells you he's got the right thing, the right stuff going on inside, I think.
Yeah, and I hope Texas fans realize, how fortunate they are to have a Michael Taff, right? He's a local kid, fought from not having a scholarship to being a starter 2 years in a row, basically, being a big piece of this defensive secondary. And, he's got it all between the ears. Again, I think he would be a tremendous football coach should that be the path that he pursues after football. He can, relate. He's very personable. He gets along well with the guys in the locker room. And again, he's got that innate leadership ability that folks and coaches specifically look for on the football field. And it's a big reason why I don't think you will ever see him go full games without being on the field. Very impressive young man. And I think, again, whenever you look at what his value, how valuable he is to this team, when you have a Derek Williams and Andrew Makuba, yet you still hear about Michael Taff being in that starting rotation as often as we have, he's not going to go away quietly. And that's going to be a big piece of the Texas defense this year.
Good stuff. Also, we heard, CJ, from Kelvin Banks, the young man that's the All-American out of Humble, Texas. Very interesting what he had to say about Jake Majors, I thought. He was asked if Jake Majors is an overlooked part of the team. And Kelvin said, look, I don't necessarily read everybody's press clippings outside of the team. He said, but I can tell you right now, Jake Majors is not overlooked on this team. In our program, quote, he is not overlooked. In my eyes, he's a very valuable piece of the puzzle. He's the best center that I could ask for. I thought that was interesting because a lot of people on the outside, fans alike, oh, well, Texas doesn't have, this player or that player is not a All-American or All-Conference or what have you. And they kind of don't realize how people feel about somebody inside that locker room, which frankly is the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely. And this has been an offseason, I would say, of Jake Majors perhaps receiving his flowers, right? He was named to the ESPN top 100 players in the country. He's been a guy that's been maybe rising up of draft boards since the offseason and certainly being named a little bit more on some of those publications that give you the first, second, third team centers to watch out for, whatever it might be. You've seen his name more so this year than ever before. And it's been great, right? It's great recognition for him. It's great recognition of the development that he's gone through with Kyle Flood and the Texas program. But he's certainly put in that work on his own. And now, again, a guy like Taff, where I hope Texas fans realize how fortunate they are to have a center as consistent as Jake Majors has been over the past 3-4 seasons. Because, again, when you have center issues, Bobby, it's never fun for the offense, for the running backs, for the quarterback specifically, and maybe more frustrating than everything, the fans at home who have to sit there and wonder if the snap, headed back to the quarterback, it's going to be at his ankles or over his head. So Jake Majors, very consistent piece in that locker room, is all about how important he is, and they make sure that he's, feeling that love, if you will, behind the scenes.
A couple other comments on Kelvin Banks. One question you asked him, I'll let you expand on what you asked and how Kelvin responded to that about Colton Vasek or Zena Umeazulu or any of the young defensive linemen or defensive ends. He really spoke highly of Colton Vasek.
Yeah, and I think, I asked the question because you at times I think with those younger defensive ends, they get lost, right? A lot of that hype and kind of that excitement right now is around the Trey Moore, around the returns of Barron Sorrell and Ethan Burke, and of course Colin Simmons, and knowing what these guys will provide for the Texas football team this year. But what about some of the young guys, and specifically Colton Vasek? And I asked Kelvin Banks about that, and he said, "Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because he's a guy since the spring." He's gone up against Colton Vasek every day, right? And you see the quote there, leaps and bounds is how he would describe his development from the beginning of the spring to what he saw on Saturday in the scrimmage. And that's great, right? You love to see that. You love to hear about young guys making those leaps, even if they're not necessarily expected to be maybe that frontline guy. I think it bodes well for 2025 and 2026. And this is a guy, again, Texas had to fight to win and get on campus. A big recruiting victory over Oklahoma to get him to flip on. Maybe that light switch flipped a little bit later than some others. But again, to hear about that from Colton, about Colton Vasek, very encouraging long term about what he could be for that Texas defense, as well as what the depth at the edge spot provides currently in 2024.
Yeah, he also talked about Trey Moore and Barron Sorrell. He goes up against them every day in practice. He said, they make me better. Iron sharpens iron. They come to work every day and both have a high motor with no days off. Another one that he mentioned, he was asked if there were any wow moments for him this camp. And he mentioned Trey Moore. And he said, look, we were in the weight room. And he goes, if you look at Trey Moore, you don't necessarily think he's really strong. He said he put up 400 plus pounds on the bench press. Was that surprising to you? I mean, Trey Moore does not look like a guy that benches 400 when you're sitting there looking at practice. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I've kind of said this a few times. I don't want to call him the runt of the defensive line room, but with the way that those bodies are kind of shaping up right now, Bobby, I mean, he's certainly not the one that stands out first with that group. But again, I think two things. He's got that underrated strength. And I think when you combine that with that quickness and that BGO, that ball get off that he has, you're dealing with a heck of a talent off the edge. And two, I mean, the work ethic for a guy at that stature to get up to a 400 plus pound on the bench press, pretty impressive stuff. So it also, tip of the hat to Torrey Becton and his staff, because that's quite an impressive number to be doing that kind of work in the summer.
All right, we're going to take your questions, talk a little bit about recruiting. I mentioned something off the start, but before I do that, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. That is Duck Camp. Duck Camp gear, like this hat, is made for people that live for the moments out there, where there are fish to catch, birds to hunt, time to kill, football to watch. They like doing all that stuff, so they built a company centered on it, based in Austin, and dedicated to giving people best-in-class hunting and fishing apparel. There are those of you out there that look forward to the opening day of hunting season and the kickoff of Longhorn football with the fervor and excitement of a 5-year-old on Christmas morning. And Duck Camp is here to let you know that from opening day to game day, they've got you covered. Duck Camp, they believe you can't just sit around and wait for adventure to come to you. You have to get out there, stay out there, and make the most of every second. Here's to great seasons, y'all. Yes, hunting and football. That's plural. Shop hunting gear at duckcamp.com. Thank you for your sponsorship, guys. All right, CJ, let's go to the questions. People are asking first about Cade Phillips. So I'm going to take that one and go from there and try to explain this the best I possibly can. Cade Phillips is a defensive back out of Fort Bend Hightower that's been committed to Texas for a little over a month now. We are hearing from behind the scenes that he may be shaky with his commitment and looking a lot at LSU at this time. This would be a blow to the Texas recruiting class. There's no doubt about it. But that is something that we can confirm has been out there. Hioli Frioli asking that question here. Phillips, really, really good prospect. Went to the state track meet in the 200 meter and also long jump 24/7, 2 different times. This would be a big blow to a Texas secondary right now that only has one other commitment, that being Caleb Chester out of Fort Bend Marshall.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at this kind of timeline and commitment phase for Cade Phillips, right? In a way, it's kind of the opposite of a Josiah Sharma, right? He commits right around that first week of July, maybe sits around a little bit and has some second thoughts during the dead period. And of course, since then, you start looking around, and for Josiah Sharman, it was, well, we thought he was going to end up at Texas. And I know that when, Cade Phillips committed to Texas at the time, LSU was that second program right there. And the big allure for him with LSU was that they were recruiting him as a true cornerback, whereas Texas was saying, hey, we got Blake Gideon here. He's going to develop you as a safety. Come out here and come be a great defensive back. We might give you a chance at cornerback, but I think full-time safety is going to be where we see you. For him to still commit to Texas, I think kind of gives them a little bit more of a pat on the back for the way in which they won that recruitment. The way that they can offer things at the University of Texas on and off the field, in the city with the coaching staff, those relationships. But cornerback is really where he's wanted to be. So for the last, 39 days or so, 40 days, I think sitting back and kind of reevaluating really what he wants to do and be at the next level has kind of been one of those big topics for him. And LSU obviously has had success in the past with Houston area DBs, and right now it's going to be a fight for Texas to hold on to him. That's for sure. However, if he does end up at LSU, Bobby, I think that opens the door a little bit more for Texas to prioritize Aiden Anding and try and keep him from joining that LSU class as well.
All right, this one from Troy Charles. I feel a little like Silas is going to bring the juice when he makes plays. I agree. I think that's exactly how I would put it too, Troy. I feel very much like he's one of those guys that gets other people pumped up and is pumped up for other people when they succeed. Quinn Ewers yesterday, CJ, or day before, talked about how he went and celebrated a Juan Davis touchdown early on in camp that really caught people's eyes. Good stuff overall, I think, from Silas Bolden. He is going to be, I think he's going to be one of those guys that is a starter, a fire starter. You know what I mean? He gets going. I think it's going to bring other people along with them, that sort of thing. He does bring the juice. You agree with that?
Oh, easily, right? It's his play style too, right? It's one of those quick, shifty guys with the electric personality, not only with the ball in his hands, but off the field, right? That kind of short story that we heard earlier this week from Quinn about Juan Davis scoring a touchdown. The first person there to celebrate was Silas Bolden. And Quinn's kind of explanation for it was pretty interesting, right? He goes, he could have been maybe a bit down in the dumps, maybe, a slow jog over there because he wasn't the one that scored the touchdown. But at the same time, it's a team, right? It's the offense beating the defense. And in that situation, that was his team winning that individual drive or that situation. So for him to celebrate in that regard, again, it shows to that humility that Michael Taff was talking about. It's showing a little bit to the overall kind of team player that he is, and also that electric personality that we've heard so often about with the ball and without the ball so far from sources, coaches, and Sarkisian.
All right. Todd Lacey has a couple of special teams questions I want to get to in combination. I'm going to read them both real quick, if you don't mind. Special teams are critical to winning a championship. Who are the ones standing out in practice? Then also from Todd Lacey, who's winning the punter battle, gunners, kickoff return, punt return? So let's start with who's standing out. Jeff Banks clearly likes Michael Taff and Mo Blackwell in all aspects of every kick and punt return and punt coverage and kick coverage. So expect those two to be out there no matter what. Now, neither of those guys are quote unquote gunners. I thought that Steve Sarkisian might take Trey Wisner away from being a gunner this time a week ago after the injury to Cedric Baxter. I asked Steve Sarkisian about that last week. He said, no, Devontae Smith played gunner, and he won the Heisman Trophy the year he played gunner at Alabama. We're not necessarily going to do that. There's not necessarily as many plays. We need good people out there, et cetera. The other gunner that I've heard has looked good in practice is Warren Roberson, a young man out of Red Oak up in the Dallas area. Those two, I think, are going to be your starting gunners as of right now. Now, they could change that based on the situation at running back, but that's what it looks like. Bert Auburn, obviously your kicker. Will Stone is your kickoff guy. And then CJ, the punt job duties. I'm hearing right now, at least, that it looks like it's coming down to Ian Ratliff and Michael Kern. However, Charlie Ferris, another walk-on that was involved in that or has been involved in that. However, I think it's going to depend on the scrimmage on Saturday, as well as maybe a kicking competition during practice between Kern, Ratliff, and Ferris to decide who the guy is. Because, look, it's easy for us to sit here and say that one or the other is going to get it. But if they can't, the issue at punter right now is Michael Kern clearly has the biggest leg, but he may not be as consistent, and his leg may not be all that much bigger than Ian Ratliff. They need to be able to depend on whoever it is back there. So that's what I have right now. I don't know if anybody has really taken a leap ahead in that competition.
Yeah, I've not heard anything either. Again, to your point, Bobby, it's going to be about consistency at the punting spot, something that Texas has had a lot of. And again, that marriage of gunners and punter is something that I thought was one of the more underrated assets of the 2023 team a year ago. Kind of in an odd spot, right? All punters are kind of brand new to the college game or to that, initial action. And I think that might level the playing field just a little bit, but in practice, the one way that you can win that job is consistently having the best punts that you can in practice and putting your team in a great spot to field that punt squad. So I'll check back in, but that's not been a concern, I would say, at the moment.
I have a couple other special teams notes. Ethan Burke and Gunnar Helm are both among the guys that have been working in up back. Those long rangy guys you want back there protecting the punter, because they can also help go downfield later and cover some ground as well. All right. Got a couple more questions we're going to get to. This is going to be a short live stream tonight. CJ is moving these days, getting ready to move, and he's going out to dinner with some neighbors tonight. So we're going to be a little shorter than this. Let's go to this one. Travis Fiquez, I think. I don't know how to say that appropriately. Sorry about that. How do we anticipate the snap share being spread between wide receivers this year? Man, I wish I had the answer for you, Travis. I tried to explain this a little bit this morning on TexasFootball.com in my article. I think that there are a couple of guys that have kind of found their role. Silas Bolden and DeAndre Moore. Bolden, because he does provide the juice. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to get, even 50% of the snap share. But he's kind of found his role. And that is the Energizer Bunny. And then DeAndre Moore is finding his role as well. CJ, we were told, and this is not any small thing, he wants to be the next Jordan Whittington on this football team. And he's doing everything humanly possible. The first several practices you and I were at, he was the very first person out to the practice field, just like Jordan Whittington a year ago, right? And I think that you see that kind of desire. He's found that. Now, Isaiah Bond had a really good scrimmage on Saturday. Jonte Cook and Matthew Golden also vying for that spot. And then Ryan Wingo, I think if anybody's going to be for sure 40% or less on reps for the first couple of games, it'll probably be Ryan Wingo, because he is only an outside receiver, and Sark may decide to move those guys around a little bit just to jumble things up as they figure out what they're doing with the run game. How do you see snap share being spread, or is there anything you would add to what I just said, CJ?
Well, I think it's interesting, right? I think coming in, you maybe have thought that everything was going to be a pretty even level playing field, right? You got three guys that have experience, but it's elsewhere. And then you got two guys that don't necessarily have a lot of experience, but they've been in the system for a year. And then, of course, Ryan Wingo, kind of that wild card who has kind of swept over Austin, like a large cloud, and everybody's looking up saying, what's going on? Well, it's Ryan Wingo leaping for a catch, basically, right? It's been that impressive each time that we've heard about, life situations, routes on air. He's been a guy in one-on-ones that can't be guarded, basically. So I lean with you a little bit on Wingo. Maybe you don't see him initially, but I don't think that that's going to be a talent that you can keep off the field too long, right? Especially with some of these early returns. And we've seen Sarkisian and his staff utilize young talent, right? What was it a year ago? It was CJ Baxter, the first running back out of the huddle onto the field. It didn't take too long for Anthony Hill to take that starting job. It didn't take too long for Manny Muhammad to be a guy that sees 60 to 70% of the snaps. The one thing I will say that kind of maybe bodes more to Wingo having to wait it out a little bit is Anthony Hill, right? He had that kind of package against Alabama, but it wasn't that full on go be my middle linebacker next to Jalen Ford, right? He kind of had to ease his way into a starting 11 role right there, whereas maybe more so he was third down specialist, come in, be a pass rusher a little bit. Maybe you see that initially against UTSA or Michigan or ULM for a guy like Ryan Wingo, where it's necessary passing situations at first, and then it's let's open it up, right? Because we did hear from Sarkisian not too long ago that he's got 5 guys right now that he can put at every single spot at that wide receiver spot and feel comfortable with what they can do on the field. The one guy he didn't name there was Wingo because it's still new to him, right? That kind of transformation from high school to college, it takes some time at the wide receiver spot, especially in a Sarkisian offense. So maybe just at the outside spot, you see him early on this season before he fully grasps what is that pretty lengthy playbook.
All right, we got time for a few more questions here tonight. Jose Rodriguez comes up with this. Bobby, does UT struggle in getting big money donors to contribute to the NIL fund? I feel like the current salary is going to expand more, and it seems like they are being conservative on the NIL front this cycle. Jose, they are not being conservative. Maybe they are in some ways, but University of Texas and the donors are activated right now. And moving forward, they're going to continue to be very impressed what they are doing. I will say this, remember, you can't just pay only for recruits. It's got to be everybody on the roster. And as your roster gets older and better, they've got to be up a little bit more too. So it's not only about recruiting, it's also about retention. And I would say that the University of Texas easily among the top 3-4 teams in the country of people who have stepped up in an admirable way to help keep Texas football among the nation's best. All right, Todd Lacey has this question. What's going on with Houston recruiting? Sark has DFW rolling, but Houston recruits still not buying in overall. Look, 2 really good recruits, maybe 3 from Houston last year, and Trey Owens, Jordan Washington, and Nate Kibble. I think all 3 of those guys are keepers. They got Caleb Chester so far. They're still in on Jonah Williams right now. Yes, they're trying to keep Cade Phillips at this point, and that may be tough, but I think Texas is doing more and doing better in Houston this year than maybe they did in 2022, I think it was, when A&M just ran the table in Houston. It has been a focal point of Steve Sarkisian. I asked him about this at SEC Media Day, SEC Spring Meetings, when we had a chance to talk to him privately. He said that shoring up recruiting in Houston was going to be a priority for him at this time. Hey, CJ, before we get going, because we do need to get going now, I want to ask you and go back to what we talked about at the outset and ask you if you had any other major takeaways from the player availability today of both Michael Taff and Kelvin Banks, the All-American. Any other major takeaways to share with folks tonight?
I really liked what Michael Taff had to say about getting guys to the ground, right? You're not going to knock down every pass. You're not going to intercept every pass. Passes will get completed, but there's been a heavy emphasis so far, and this was great to hear from Michael Taff. One of the big leaders in that defensive secondary room is when passes are completed, the goal is to get that guy down to the ground immediately. And so he mentioned, it's a catch tackle. He gets the ball, get him down to the ground immediately. Live to see another day. Don't let those plays extend into explosive 20, 30, 40-yard runs that eventually end in points for the opposing team. And you think about that and think common sense, right? And tackle the guy with the ball, right? That's the name of the game in football. But for him to kind of vocalize that and kind of put in the words of what the defensive secondary has been, kind of approaching that kind of aspect of the game in, I thought that was encouraging. I like to hear that from him. Of course, again, it's kind of the mindset in which you look at it and say, if you put your mind to something, you'll go accomplish it. I think that's going to be a big focus this year. Again, looking back at that Houston game, it was a death by 1,000 underneath routes, and Texas just didn't have an answer. And all of a sudden, what did they, the opponent the next week try to do? Well, they tried to run some underneath routes, and Texas wasn't having it. So for that to be the mindset, to be an opportunistic defense, as we talked about on Saturday with the 5 takeaways there, but to also have that, live to see another down, if you will. I thought that was huge.
Yeah, I agree. And he echoed in that statement Pete Kwiatkowski's keys to success this year. He felt like his defense's pass secondary was okay in actual coverage last year. It was the yards after catch that he thought killed him. And that's what Michael Taff specifically was really talking about there. So I couldn't agree more with you. I do want to grab another couple of questions. This is from Zane Petty. Is Cole Hudson beating out Hayden Connor at left guard? I had not heard that. I do know this. Cole Hudson played right guard in the scrimmage on Saturday with the ones at times when DJ Campbell went out. They are freely rotating both Cole Hudson and Nato Umeozulu at both guard spots in an attempt to really get them involved with the offense this year. I think Kyle Flood wants to have those guys more ready to go. Last one for the night, and then we'll see you again tomorrow. You guys again tomorrow morning on Coffee and Football. Arch Horns, what's our best case for final recruiting rankings? Number 5 through number 7 seems like a bit of a letdown. At what point do we move into the consistent top tier like Bama, Georgia, and Ohio State? Texas has been in the top 5 for 3 consecutive years. They're in that category, guys. Now, they may not be 1 through 3, to your point, every year, like Georgia has been, or not. I mean, like Bama has been. Ohio State hasn't been in the top 3 every year for the last 5 years. So that's high cotton you're trying to pick there. And I think it's going to be difficult for any team to be that consistently. But I do think Texas has that possibility when they win again this year. Because only 1 year of winning is not necessarily going to get you into that upper echelon automatically.
Yeah, ask TCU about 1 year of winning, right? And how they're still recruiting. Thing now I want to talk about, hey, recruiting entirely it takes time, right? In the cycle. This year, a year ago, Texas didn't have Colin Simmons in the class. They didn't have Brandon Baker. They didn't have Ryan Wingo. And what did they end up being, Bobby? They were all 5 stars, right? What's to come this month and a little bit into September? Well, you're looking at a Michael Fasusi commitment, a Jamie French commitment. You're still waiting on what's going to happen with Madden Ferramo, a big-time prospect as well. Michael Terry, Jonah Williams. Some big names are still on the table. To worry about where recruiting is now, and I think Texas has a pretty good group of guys in the fold right now. But that ceiling is still able to rise or sink or whatever you want to call it later on in the cycle. These guys just have to come to their decision timeline. So it's – you'd love to have a great class in the fold already before the season. I think Texas does. To be right on the verge of a top 10 with only 1 5-star kid and still wait on about 4 or 5 guys on that fringe of being a 5-star talent, just got to wait.
Yeah. All right. That's going to do it. We wanted to do a quick one tonight. I wish we had more time to answer more questions, spend more time with you, but CJ needs to go say goodbye to some friends as he's moving places there in Austin. All right. CJ Vogel, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody on Texas Football who joined in tonight. Join us on OnTexasFootball.com. We'll also be back again tomorrow morning, unless major news breaks tonight, and then we'll be back with that as well. But for CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. Thanks also to our producer, Matt Hutchison. Hook 'em.